forward, we've moved on into audits and evaluations looking more at the cost of the process. But having said that, there were after actions done to address those issues.
So the issues were processing issues, or they were conditions?
I think there were a number of issues regarding the way in which different aspects of care were conducted, the medical care, some of the feeding, the housing, those sort of issues, and then there were processing issues.
About how many evacuees were processed there?
I don't have the specific number for that one. The total number was about 108,000.
And what's the purpose for this? These people, they're kind of in purgatory. They can't get us. What is their status?
So as I understand it, the purpose was to provide safe spaces for these individuals to continue to pursue their refugee status and their applications for visas. And so folks were evacuated from Afghanistan.
But there was red flag issues with some of these evacuees. Is that not accurate?
So we also found in our vetting work, and again, DOD is not primarily responsible for the vetting. That's primarily the responsibility of DHS. But we did find issues when we looked at that regarding whether all of the information that DOD had in its systems regarding some individuals whether all that information was being provided to DHS, essentially because of limitations on the sharing of that information that were in place when they got that. And so there were sort of informal procedures worked out to identify individuals who had derogatory information. That doesn't mean that they necessarily say were terrorists or something else, but there were concerns, and not all that went forward. We're doing a follow-up project right now that's looking at the current status of that.
So the reason why the camp is still being funded, and we have, the U.S. national, government housing these individuals, because we have not been able to process them. We haven't figured out who they really are, whether they are a terrorist or not.
No, I'm sorry. I think those are separate issues, and I can get back to you with more information on this if you'd like. But there's the one issue regarding the provision of housing and other services to the people under Operation Allies Welcome. The separate issue is the support for the screening and vetting process, and that's what I was alluding to with the latter. I don't believe that the latter was particularly related to Camp Bondsteel.
Do you have any idea how many Afghanistan refugees that have entered the United States are you aware or investigating any crimes that they have committed in the United States?
So my office has, I believe, about 24 active investigations that both from legacies, from OFS and from OES. Those don't involve refugees or that sort of situation. One of the issues we found was that there was ambiguity regarding jurisdiction over how to investigate crimes involving individuals who were brought into the country, and that's one of the places.
But there have been crimes.
Gentlemen's time's expired, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know that there have been crimes. My office, that wouldn't be our jurisdiction is over DOD. One of the things we found was there needed to be better delineation of jurisdiction over who would investigate any such crimes. But I don't have any information regarding whether those individuals themselves had committed crimes, if that helps.
Thank you. Chair recognizes a gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here. The United States 20-year experiment in Afghanistan has been a complete and total disaster. $2.3 trillion was spent. 2,328 U.S. military personnel have been killed. And in almost every theater the U.S. meddles in, whether it be Iraq, Syria, or Afghanistan, death and destruction follows. And the U.S. has nothing to show for it. And what a shame, considering the immense sacrifice our brave soldiers have made fighting in senseless wars forced upon them by out-of-touch political elites. The obvious lesson to draw from the recent Middle Eastern wars, and one that the American people learned long ago, but somehow few elected officials from either party seem to understand, is that these wars don't work. The only fruits are evil. Many people die, lives are ruined, and America is weakened. But now our genius leaders have decided that what didn't work in the Middle East, and which was tried multiple times, must be rinsed and repeated in Europe. And the same result is playing out in Ukraine as it did in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen. The list goes on and on. And the result is a more unstable world and an immense amount of human suffering. Mr. Storch, the grieving mother of a Marine who was one of the fallen 13 servicemen who died at the hands of the infamous suicide bomber in Kabul contacted my office with some pertinent questions. The Marine's name was Marine Lance Corporal Dylan Marola. As a background, President Biden sent 3,000 troops in August of 2021 to help with that evacuation. Also, if one reviews the ages of the 11 of the 13 servicemen who died, they were anywhere from the ages of 20 to 23. Marine Lance Corporal Dylan Marola and 8 others had only been in Afghanistan for under 2 weeks when they were killed. So my question, why were such young, inexperienced troops chosen for such a dangerous mission?
So thank you for the question. Obviously, each of those losses is a tragedy, right? Having said that, I always want to be frank with you. That's not an area our office has not looked at that. I did mention earlier I did reach out to get the full after-action report, the classified report that was done by the department, and my team and I are reviewing that, and if there's additional oversight that's impactful to do, we'll do it.
I'd love to, one of the things we want to look at it is what percentage of the 3,000 troops had 2 years of experience of service or less. We want to find out about that because it seems that when you're coming from a hostile situation, you want your best, your brightest, your most trained. And then also who made the final call as to that, the 3,000 troops. And reading in your testimony, it's clear the U.S. taxpayer money has been funding the Taliban. Once again, you mentioned in your testimony that you could not determine whether hundreds of millions of dollars of ammunition were used properly. Are you confident this ammunition did not fall in the hands of the Taliban?
So we know, and the department, I believe, has reported to Congress that there was about $7.12 billion worth of various equipment that was in the possession of the Afghan military at the time of the collapse. The condition of that we don't know, and obviously we can't go back in to audit. With regard to things like ammunition, we found for years in many audits that there was not adequate control, and there was subjecting to theft and otherwise things like ammunition, radios, vehicles, night vision devices, all sorts of stuff. And so I would not have any confidence as to the status of any of that. With regard to the equipment, I will say, in fairness, the Department of Defense has said that much of that was demilled, it was rendered inoperable. Again, we have no way to go back in to check on any of that.
Mr. Sopko, in your testimony, you cite the Taliban's practice of forcing NGOs to give them a cut of the aid the NGOs distributed. You even mentioned an instance where the Taliban often allowed one particular NGO to rent vehicles directly from them, the Taliban. How much foreign aid do you suspect reaches the Taliban? And could you hazard to give me a percentage?
I can't, sir, because of the lack of cooperation from state and aid.
This is troubling to me, really troubling, and I think it's troubling for a lot of us, is you can't make decisions if you have no information in front of you.
I agree.
And it's really sad. I will have a bunch of follow-up questions for all of you, and I think we need to follow the money. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Luna for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. And before I go into my questioning, I just wanted to correct some of the statements made by one of my colleagues from across the aisle. First of all, for those who are reporters here, the reason why some Republicans didn't support the PAC Act, and I say this as a veteran and the wife of a combat wounded veteran in Afghanistan, that when you are using veterans, especially with burn pits, and then you stick $400 billion in unnecessary spending so you can get your pet projects paid for, we are not going to support that, and we do not advise using veterans to get your pet projects paid for. So that's the first thing. Second thing, Mr. Garcia had annotated earlier that this is a very complicated issue. Obviously, the entire region of Afghanistan has been destabilized, and it is known as the graveyard of empire. So there's a big foreign policy issue that we have in this country, and I do believe that this administration is unqualified and intentionally doing the wrong thing because, in my opinion, they are trying to empower China, and I will go to the grave with that one. But to further why we are here today, I believe that the military as a whole is suffering from people that have been put in charge and do not truly understand the culture of the military, and thus they have implemented policy that is not enabling our warfighters to do their jobs. War is not fun. I would never advocate for it. But when you have people that are on the ground, specifically with what happened in Afghanistan, they need to be trusted to do the right thing, and therefore the red tape has to be cut. My question is for Mr. Sopko. You know, I heard a testimony from a previous committee that had a young Marine sniper that had said that he was not authorized to take the shot that could have prevented the suicide bomber from detonating that, and thus saving the lives of the 13 killed, 170 civilians, and then the 45 wounded service members. Has anything been changed with the laws of armed conflict and or memorandums from the DoD to enable, whether it's team sergeants in special operations communities, whether it is people who are at the lowest level of leadership, to authorize those military officials to do their jobs?
I'm not able to answer that because I am not the DoD IG. I think you should ask Mr. Storch.
But after okay, Mr. Storch, would you be able to answer that question? Has anything been done in regards to the law of armed conflict or memorandum down to allow lower levels of leadership, to include team sergeants of special operations communities and or the acting commanders in some of these units that go out to do their jobs, to make those decisions where they're not looking at necessarily, I guess from my opinion, getting in trouble for doing the right thing and protecting their guys?
So I'm honestly not aware of the answer to your question. I'd be happy to have my folks look into it and get back to you.
Okay.
I will say we have done work looking at the law of war and the need for updating of the policies. Whether that goes to your question, I don't honestly know the answer, but we'll check into it.
We need to empower our warfighters to do their jobs, and that means that we have to trust them to make those difficult decisions in those horrific times. The reason why I'm so impassioned about this topic is behind me you'll see a picture of Staff Sergeant Ryan Christian Knaus. He was actually one of the 13 that was killed in Afghanistan, and his mother lives in my district back home. And although I was not a member of Congress at the time, within 24 hours of finding out that he had been killed, I actually called his mom. And I had to make that phone call. And as a member now, I'm sure any representative who has had to do that, that is one of the hardest phone calls you will have to make, to hear the heartbreak in a parent's voice for losing a child. And when you sit here and you hear how this administration handled it, I don't know if you are aware of this, but President Biden, after seeing his mom at a memorial for this, his first statement to her name's Paula, was, I can understand if you're angry, but then declined to hug the actual mother, of which she responded, this could and should have never happened. What has this administration done to really help the families heal after the fact? Because the fact is that had that Marine Corps sniper been authorized to take that shot, this might not have happened the way that it did. There's a lot of obviously drops in regards to foreign policy, but I want to know, now that that is done, what is the administration doing to allow this family and these families to have closure? Any of you?
I could just say that's not something we've done any work on. I appreciate the question.
Are you guys in correspondence or actively talking to any of the family members in regards to your report?
The oversight that we've done would call on us to contact the family members. So I think the answer is no.
Would you be willing to if they reached out? Because I can tell you that my office spoke with about seven of those family members, and I think that they would like to get some answers.
So we're always happy to talk to people and to hear from them. And if there are issues to be addressed, we'll look into addressing them.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Chairman, I yield my time.
Chair recognizes Ms. Mace for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of our witnesses today for being with us this afternoon. As one of the biggest military failures in decades, this administration is yet to provide adequate information regarding the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Instead of reflecting and learning from this catastrophe over the past year and a half, it's been nothing but stonewalling and pointing fingers. Even the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, said he has no regrets about the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan. No regrets for the 13 lives lost. I believe that's an embarrassing comment from the Secretary. Well, I'm not sure what Secretary Austin saw in August of 21, but I can tell you the American people saw the execution of a half-baked withdrawal plan, which resulted in the deaths of 13 U.S. soldiers and left behind thousands of interpreters that were willing to risk and take a bullet for our country, whom we left behind, our country and our soldiers. I want to say thank you to the Inspector Generals for being here. We have a long road ahead of us to get down to the bottom of what actually went wrong, and we appreciate your time and your effort this afternoon in that endeavor as we continue this fact-finding mission. Mr. Storch, while I have you here this afternoon, I have a few questions unrelated to Afghanistan. My first few questions are about the role of an Inspector General, and you can presume that my questions are yes or no. Do you believe in protecting the integrity of our government? Is that the role of the IG?
Yes.
Do you believe in detecting waste, fraud, abuse, misconduct, and corruption in our government?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you believe the government should be transparent in all that it does?
Yes.
Do you believe in providing reports to the government about potential waste, fraud, abuse, misconduct, and corruption in government?
Yes.
Do you believe such reports should have a full set of facts in order for them to be complete?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Storch, in 2020, your office issued a report on the Jedi Cloud contract. Are you familiar with that contract?
I am.
Are you familiar with the report?
I am.
Okay. As you said earlier, without having a full set of facts, a review can't possibly be full and complete. I've read the report and talked to different folks. It appears here we had an employee at the Pentagon who sold her company to a partner of a major contractor at the Pentagon, and you had exposure to that contractor in her job. And when you read it, it looks like there's the potential for conflict of interest, something that the American people have no appetite for, regardless of who's in charge. And either she spectacularly failed to disclose who she sold her company to and the amount of money that she was paid during the duration of her employment at the Pentagon, or maybe she did the bare minimum legally, it was appropriate, but maybe not morally or ethically. If you sell your company for $1.5 million to a partner that does business with a major company, billions of dollars of business with the DoD, maybe you'd want to disclose that information before taking that job. And she spectacularly failed to disclose payments, and or maybe she did the bare minimum legally. It's hard to say, but to the average American, it just looks like pay to play. It looks like corruption at DoD. It looks like corruption at a federal agency. And so my next few questions are for you today. Would you be able to provide me a list of all the IG investigators and employees who worked on this particular report?
So let me say I am familiar with the
Yes
report.
or no? Would you be able to provide me a list of the IGs and or investigators, excuse me, or employees who worked on this particular report?
I am responsible for the work of my office, so no, I don't believe it's consistent with IG practice to provide the names of underlying individuals who worked on it.
Do you think the report was is complete and full?
So I did have opportunity, as I'm sure you know, based upon other inquiries, to review it myself, and I'm satisfied with the report. We are doing additional follow-up work, and I'm not aware of this.
I'm not satisfied with the report.
I'd be happy to discuss that with you, ma'am.
Well, we're doing that now. How can anyone conclude there was no conflict of interest or ethical violation by this employee if we failed to find out who purchased her company and how that connection was? Like, do you believe that a DoD employee should disclose who's buying their company before they come into the job or after? Because she disclosed these payments the week that she was the week that she left on her termination report, but didn't disclose all of it before she got hired.
So
Should they disclose this information before or after they get hired?
when you were taking me through the litany of questions, you may have noticed I paused a bit when you talked about all the relevant
So my question
information.
is, should a DoD employee disclose who they sold their company to before or after they take the job?
I think the only honest answer is it depends, ma'am. And so what I wouldn't do is assume that the information in the report represents the full sum of information
So then
that
it
was
would be
available to
so
my
it's an
office.
incomplete report, is what you're saying?
No, it's standard
Well,
practice.
if it doesn't have the full sum of information in the report, then how do you describe it as complete?
So it is.
That's
I was a federal
incomplete.
prosecutor for 24 years before I joined the IG community. Not all the information you obtain in any audit or investigation is
It's
going to be included within the report.
317 pages
Believe
of
me, I'm
documents.
painfully aware of that, ma'am.
So how do you say it's complete if it doesn't have the sum of all information? I mean, it's certainly in the 20 pages that mentioned the specific employee, it does not mention at all who she sold her company to. I mean, it's absent there. Would you agree to cooperate with me and other members of Congress as we investigate this issue?
I'd be happy to cooperate with Congress and provide whatever information I appropriately can.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I